Good morning. This is Tulia De Silva for Gold FM, bringing you your morning news.
The news headlines on Gold FM.
In your news headlines, President to meet fasting school development officers. Shiranthi to FCID today. Opposition leaders meet opposition leader. Sri Lanka's World Cup squad named. And in news overseas, Trump massively slashes tariffs on India.
The top story on Gold FM.
The Department of Examinations released a critical update regarding the upcoming ordinary level exams, scheduled to begin on the 17th of this month. Private candidates requiring amendments to their admission forms must log on to the official website and enter their national identity card number to make changes. The deadline for these corrections remains fixed at midnight on the 10th of February, with officials confirming that no further extensions will occur. School candidates will receive their admission cards through their respective principals, who must collect them from zonal education officers. Any necessary corrections for school students must be handled by principals using the department web portal. For private applicants, the department is currently dispatching admission cards via post to their registered home address. The ordinary level examinations will take place across 3,500 centres island-wide until February 26th.
This is the local news on Gold FM.
The hunger strike outside the Presidential Secretariat continues for an 8th consecutive day as school development officers demand immediate absorption into the teaching service. Despite a scheduled meeting at the Presidential Secretariat tomorrow evening, protesters gathered at Fort Railway Station this morning to launch a march towards the President's office. This intensification follows several hospitalizations due to deteriorating health among those fasting since the 26th of January, with 2 additional officers joining the strike yesterday to replace those incapacitated. Several political figures visited the site to express solidarity with the demonstrators, who claim over 6 years of classroom service. At the same time, education graduates staged a separate protest at the Isurupaya Ministry of Education, calling for recruitment without further examinations for those already holding relevant degrees. Former First Lady Shiranthi Rajapaksa and members of Parliament Namal Rajapaksa are to give statements to the authorities regarding ongoing investigations today. The Financial Crimes Investigation Division expects Shiranthi Rajapaksa to provide a statement regarding the Sirilia Savia project, following a 2-week extension granted at her request. Meanwhile, the Criminal Investigation Department called upon Namal Rajapaksa to address alleged links with organised crime figure Kehilbhadra Padme. This follows the appearance of former ministers Chamal Rajapaksa and Prasanna Ranatunga before the CID yesterday on similar grounds. In a separate development, the suspended Deputy Secretary-General of Parliament, Chaminda Kularatna, filed a formal complaint with the Bribery Commission. The petition accuses Speaker Dr. Jagat Vikramaratne of corruption, including the misuse of state vehicles and the illegal collection of multiple fuel allowances. A Fisheries Minister, Ramalingam Chandrasekhar, issued a stern condemnation following an assault on local fishermen by the Indian Coast Guard. The minister confirmed that the Indian High Commissioner in Colombo was informed of the incident to ensure legal and diplomatic action. The confrontation took place on the 29th of January. Reports indicate that 12 fishermen who set sail from Vinnapur in early December faced an attack while at sea. Following an intervention by the Sri Lankan Navy, the group returned to the island. 6 individuals remain hospitalized and are receiving treatment for serious injuries. Deputy Minister of Fisheries Ratna Gamage reported a second incident involving another Sri Lankan vessel. Sri Lanka's 1.1 million MSMEs, faces a race against a liquidity trap following the recovery from Cyclone Ditwa. While major industries have rebounded, the SME sector, which accounts for 45% of national employment, requires specialized financial instruments to survive increasingly frequent climate shocks. These are some of the thoughts featured in a high-level webinar co-hosted by the International Chamber of Commerce Sri Lanka and Women in Management. The forum featured key insights from the head of Sri Lanka's leading commercial banks and tourism authorities on transitioning from emergency moratoriums to long-term responsible finance. Kavinda De Soiza, chairman of the Bank of Ceylon, emphasizes that unlike large corporates, SME failures have immediate, devastating impacts on family livelihoods.
Fundamentally, if you take the corporate sector, they talk about quarterly earnings and forecasts and, market update. But when an SME is impacted, keep in mind, they have to pay their children's school rent, their rent, school fees, education-related expenses, medicine. All of those things come to a standstill. So I just want to pause for us to understand the human side of this. SME, business, families depend on a daily cash flow. So that's something critical for the livelihoods of all Sri Lankans. And as I believe many have alluded before, about 10% of the total population got affected. And as we discussed, I think from a corporate point of view, major industries have come back to normal. This is something that we see here and read, and I have physically seen to my eyes. But SMEs are needing quick, fast support. So speed, execution is critical. We learned a few things through this crisis, and over the past so many years: liquidity, low resilience, cash buffers.
Damit Palewata, the CEO of Hatton National Bank, argues that climate shocks are no longer one-off events and calls for a structural shift in banking.
Building climate resilience SME is a shared responsibility. So it is no longer going to be one-off event. We need to realize it. Once it is realized that those are not one-off events, so you need to start building mitigants. How do we work around it to make sure that we don't fall into those one-off type of natural disaster event. Even the recovery will take time if you are not ready to face it. Now, some of the things that we can do, the long-term recovery of industry as a whole requires more than a relief. I think relief, everybody is going behind relief. Once a disaster happens or natural calamity happens, is not going to be sustainable. So it requires thinking beyond that. Maybe I would suggest few things that we can think. This kind of situations calls for risk sharing between banks, insurance, government agencies, and maybe sometimes donor funding institutions. So then the risk is shared. There is a better propensity to take a risk to support, and with a long-term view. If the risk is not shared, it's always maybe short-term focus. Then we also need to get used to wider use of insurance. The impression about insurance across the country is not that favorable. So we need to start using insurance as a risk mitigant. When something happens, there is a fallback option that we can work toward. And also something that we can look at, probably this country has not seen thus far, is a disaster-linked credit. So something that somebody can come up with that innovation. How do we make sure, like that we have introduced credit on a seasonal repayment terms, which is different to monthly installment plans for agricultural sector. So maybe somebody needs to work on that disaster-linked loans.
Dilip Mudadenia, the chair of the Sri Lanka Tourism Advisory Council, notes that while the growth cycle has returned, SMEs face prohibitive costs in scaling up.
In the growth cycle, the type of facilities and the type of support that you need is slightly different. And even though it had a certain impact on tourism, I would say that impact is actually minimized apart from the image impact, which has completely been taken out. And the second impact is in terms of the infrastructure, which is also, there is a lot of infrastructure impact in terms of railway, etc. But in terms of other properties, there is, but not significant compared to the other areas in the economy. So what we need now is actually, these businesses will need to scale it up. They will need to move up in the ladder in order to get various support that they require. 10 million, 12 million. So in the scale of things which people want to, that we need to be ready from a insurance perspective, from a financial management perspective, that every day is not going to be, the sun is not going to shine. There are some challenges that will come in. So we need to be ready during that time rather than going to the government with a begging ball and ask them to restructure, because that's the nature of the business.
Opposition figures claim the administration currently works to ideologically align the nation's democratic institutes with the ruling party. Following talks with opposition leaders Sajith Premadasa, Professor G.L. Pires and Udaya Gammampilla raised concerns over institutional independence, while United National Party officials met at Sirikota to discuss the evolving political landscape. These groups maintain that democratic pillars must remain free from partisan influence to ensure fair governance.
Now for some news in brief.
The Parliament meets today to begin a 3-day session where proceedings start at 9:30 a.m. today, with the first 30 minutes dedicated to parliamentary business, understanding orders.
The business news on Gold FM.
And now it's time for a stock market update, brought to you by Rushan Fernando of Capital Trust Securities.
The stock market decline extended a new month, with all share price index dropping 130 points to close at 23,681. The most active S&P SL20 index also dropped 43 points to close at 6,597. Despite yesterday's pullback, the broader index is still up 3.6% year-to-date. Turnover amounted to 5.17 billion rupees. This was supported by active trading in Colombo Dockyard PLC, Ceylon Land, the Sri Lanka Housing. Sector-wise actively traded contributions came from the sectors of capital goods, diversification, financials and insurance. Meanwhile, 151 stocks declined while 71 stocks gained, as selective selling in key counters dragged the market lower. This was primarily driven by losses in Selinco Holdings, Colombo Dockyard and Melsacom.
Gold prices across Sri Lanka saw a sharp decline following a significant downturn in international trading. Traders at Colombo Sea Street reported a 12,000 rupee drop per sovereign, with 24-carat gold now trading at 368,000 rupees and 22-carat at 338,600 rupees. Global rates slipped to approximately $4,687 per ounce, a $200 decrease since Friday, as local analysts pointed towards continued volatility in the world market. Sri Lanka's tourism sector kicked off 2026 welcoming 277,327 visitors in January, to surpass the previous high of 252,761 last year. India remained the top source market, followed by the United Kingdom and Russia, as daily arrivals peaked at over 10,000 travellers mid-month. Sri Lanka Customs exceeded its January revenue target by 45%, collecting over 232 billion rupees. The performance followed accelerated container clearances and stricter enforcement against under-invoicing, despite projected declines in vehicle imports for the year-end. A sharp rise in festive season currency withdrawals reveals a deep-seated public preference for cash over digital payments in Sri Lanka. Central bank data shows that money in circulation reached nearly 1.8 trillion rupees by December, as low interest rates and a vast informal economy discouraged the shift to formal banking.
International news on Gold FM.
The White House announced a significant breakthrough in trade relations with New Delhi today. US President Donald Trump confirmed a deal to reduce tariffs on Indian goods to 18%, down from a previous 50%. In exchange, India pledges to cease all purchases of Russian oil. India now looks to source energy from the United States and possibly Venezuela. The deal also includes a commitment from New Delhi to buy $500 billion worth of American energy, technology, and agricultural products.
Entertainment news on Gold FM.
The new Melania Trump documentary earned $7 million during its opening weekend, surpassing industry predictions and making the strongest debut for a non-fiction feature in over a decade. However, this comes against a record $40 million on rights by Amazon MGM and an additional $35 million on marketing for the film, which offers an intimate look at the First Lady's life preceding the January 2025 inauguration.
Sports news on Gold FM.
The National Selection Committee officially released the squad for the upcoming T20 Cricket World Cup, confirming Dasun Shanaka as the captain. To view the full squad, visit www.heronews.lk/en. The third ODI between Sri Lanka and England will take place at Pallekele International Cricket Stadium today at 7 p.m. That's it for now. This is Dulya De Silva for Gold FM. Thank you and have a lovely day ahead.
Think a moment for a better tomorrow.